I want to start with the first paycheck after the raise, because that is the part people remember wrong. The email arrives first. A new title, maybe. A new salary line. A number that is larger than the number you have been living with. For a second, the room gets quieter. You do the math before you mean to. After taxes, after insurance, after everything taken out, there will still be more. Not movie money, not quit tomorrow money, but enough to matter. Enough that the last week of the month might stop feeling like a narrow hallway. Enough that the balance check might stop coming with that small physical brace in your stomach. You think, this is it. This is the breathing room. And for a few weeks, it really is. The first larger deposit lands. Bills get paid with less friction. You replace the thing you had been postponing. You buy the better groceries without making a whole internal case for them. You say yes to dinner because for once, yes does not feel irresponsible. The world does not transform, but it softens. You are not suddenly rich. You are just less cornered. And less cornered is a very real kind of wealth when you have been living tight for a long time. Then the months settle in. The novelty comes off the new number. One night near the end of the month, you open the banking app, expecting to feel the same looseness you felt at the beginning. The account looks familiar, not destroyed, not alarming, just familiar in the worst way. The same low point, the same small calculation, the same little pause before you decide whether something can wait until next Friday. And this is the confusing part. You cannot find the crime scene. There was no emergency. No reckless weekend. No single purchase that explains it. The raise was real. The relief was real. But somehow, life has already expanded around the new money, and the extra room has disappeared into the walls. That is the case file today. Most people do not lose a raise in one dramatic mistake. They lose it by teaching ordinary life to cost more the moment relief arrives. I want to show you how that happens, why it starts with small upgrades but reaches all the way to the house people congratulate you for buying, and how to keep the next income improvement from turning into a permanent bill. Because the stakes are not small. If every financial win becomes a higher cost floor, you can earn more for years and still feel pinned to the same month. Your resume improves. Your tax return improves. Your lifestyle looks like it moved up. But inside your actual day, the pressure returns, because the raise did not become freedom. It became a more expensive version of normal. The mechanism is a ratchet. A ratchet is built to move easily in one direction and resist the other. Click by click, it tightens. Each click holds. It does not loosen itself just because the pressure gets uncomfortable. That one-way action is the whole design. Many households have the same device hidden inside their standard of living. Income rises, and some piece of life rises with it. A convenience becomes standard. A nicer option becomes expected. A larger bill gets normalized. The move upward feels natural because it arrives wearing the costume of relief. The move back down feels like loss, even if the old version was fine 6 months ago. So the cost floor rises, then locks. The raise creates a gap for a moment, and the comfort ratchet closes the gap before anyone names it. That is the thesis. The real trap is the comfort ratchet, the quiet habit of converting every income improvement into a more expensive baseline that steals tomorrow's freedom before it arrives. Notice what that is not saying. It is not saying pleasure is bad. It is not saying comfort is suspicious. It is not saying you should receive a raise and respond by living like nothing good is allowed to happen. That kind of advice turns money into punishment, and people can only obey punishment for so long before they rebel against it. The problem is not enjoyment. The problem is conversion. A raise is a chance to change the shape of your life. The comfort ratchet quietly converts that chance into higher overhead. It takes money that could have lowered pressure and turns it into the new minimum price of feeling ordinary. Start with the small clicks, because they are where the pattern becomes invisible. When the raise arrives, most people do not go do something cartoonishly irresponsible. They make reasonable adjustments. That is why the trap works. The grocery cart changes first. Not wildly, just slightly. The better cuts, the prepared vegetables, the nicer coffee. The brand that used to be for when people came over, now just the brand. Dinner out moves from event to fallback. Delivery moves from emergency to option to reflex. The streaming plan goes up one tier. The rideshare becomes easier to justify when it is raining, then when it is late, then when you are tired. None of these decisions is scandalous. Most are not even wrong. The mistake is thinking their only effect is the amount on the receipt. The deeper effect is training. Every repeated upgrade teaches your life what normal feels like. The first time you order dinner because the day was long, it feels like help. The 10th time, it feels like a habit. The 30th time, cooking after work feels like a downgrade, even if cooking was normal not long ago. The first month in the nicer apartment feels like proof that the raise mattered. The second year, the rent is simply rent. The mind is very bad at keeping luxury labeled as luxury after it has been repeated enough times. It files the upgraded version under basic operating conditions. That filing error is expensive. A one-time pleasure ends. A trained baseline stays. And once a baseline stays, it does not politely shrink when you need money for something else. It resists. It has routines, expectations, social habits, saved payment methods, default settings, and a body memory of what life is supposed to feel like. The old normal becomes something you are not returning to. It starts to feel like going backward, even if it was perfectly livable before the raise. This is why the usual lecture about coffee misses the point. The cup is not the villain. A person can buy coffee and still build a strong financial life. A person can brown bag every lunch and still ratchet up housing, cars, travel, gadgets, and obligations until every raise disappears. The question is not whether one small purchase is allowed. The question is whether a category has quietly changed status from occasional comfort to required baseline. The danger is not the coffee. The danger is the sentence, "I can afford this now," being repeated across 20 categories until the raise has no job left except supporting the sentence. So the first rule of the comfort ratchet is this. The emotional reason for an upgrade can be valid even when the recurring cost is still a trap. That matters because shame makes people stupid with money. If the only tool you have is guilt, you will either overcorrect into joyless restriction or give up and let the ratchet run. Nora's case file is calmer than that. We are not asking whether the purchase proves you are good or bad. We are asking what it does to the floor. Does it temporarily improve the room, or does it permanently raise the price of entering the room? That question gets sharper when the ratchet moves from daily comforts to big, respectable upgrades, because the same mechanism that hides inside groceries and delivery becomes much more powerful when it attaches itself to a socially approved milestone. The premium version is the bigger house. This is where the comfort ratchet becomes difficult to challenge, because nobody calls it lifestyle creep when you buy more space. They call it growing up. They call it the next chapter. They call it what you worked for. The listing photos help. The kitchen island helps. The extra bedroom helps. The quiet street, the better school boundary, the office with a door, the garage that can finally hold both cars. It does not feel like consumption. It feels like arrival. And sometimes more space is the right decision. A cramped home can create real daily strain. A long commute can drain a life. A safer neighborhood, a needed bedroom, a layout that supports actual work and actual family rhythms can be worth paying for. The point is not that a bigger home is always wrong. The point is that it is rarely just bigger. It is a full baseline reset, and the ceremony around it often prevents people from pricing that reset honestly. A house upgrade is not one purchase. It is a bundle of recurring claims. The mortgage is the visible one, so that is the one people discussed. But the mortgage is only the front door. Property taxes come in behind it. Insurance comes in behind that. Utilities scale because more space must be heated, cooled, lit, repaired, cleaned, furnished, and maintained. The roof is larger. The systems are larger. The surprises are larger. Even the empty room has a carrying cost. It may sit unused most days, but it still sends a small invoice through the electric bill, the tax bill, the insurance premium, the maintenance budget, and the interest portion of the loan. That is why a house can turn one good income year into a 30-year obligation. The raise arrives, and instead of becoming slack in the system, it becomes the proof that the larger payment is possible. Possible becomes approved. Approved becomes normal. Normal becomes non-negotiable. The ratchet clicks once, very loudly, but because everyone claps at the same time, many people do not hear the click. And in the early years, much of that payment is not building the kind of equity people imagine when they say, "At least I am paying myself." Early mortgage payments are heavy with interest. Maintenance does not become equity. Insurance does not become equity. Utilities do not become equity. Taxes do not become equity. Furniture bought to fill a room does not become equity. A lot of the bigger house bill is simply overhead with better lighting. This is not anti-housing. It is anti-confusion. A right-sized home can stabilize a life. An oversized home can turn income into a carrying strap. Both can look identical from the curb. The difference is not the square footage. The difference is whether the home lowers real pressure or raises the minimum payment required to maintain the image of progress. That is why the bigger house belongs in this episode, but cannot be the whole episode. Housing is the largest proof, not the only proof. The same logic is running anywhere a raise gets translated into a permanent claim. Cars can do it. Travel expectations can do it. Family obligations can do it. Professional identity can do it when a job at a higher level quietly requires a more expensive wardrobe, commute, meals, network, and recovery routine. The ratchet is not a product category. It is a conversion process. More income enters, higher normal exits. What makes the process hard to fight is that many upgrades do improve life at first. That is the honest complication. Delivery really can save a brutal evening. A cleaner, safer home really can reduce stress. More reliable transportation really can help a family function. Outsourcing a task you hate can return hours and sanity. The comfort ratchet does not work by offering fake benefits. It works by offering real benefits that fade into the baseline faster than the payment fades from the account. The emotional benefit depreciates. The bill remains. That sentence is worth keeping. The emotional benefit depreciates. The bill remains. The first few weeks of a new convenience are vivid because the contrast is fresh. You remember what life felt like before it. After enough repetition, the contrast disappears. The convenience becomes background. You no longer feel richer because of it. You only feel the absence if it is removed. That is the point where comfort has become a dependency, and dependency is the ratchet's favorite material. So how do you stop it without turning your life into an austerity contest? The move is not to reject the raise. The move is to assign the raise before your habits do. Most raises vanish because they land inside the same checking account stream that already feeds ordinary life. That stream has a current. It pulls money toward whatever is easiest, most familiar, most emotionally justified, or most frictionless. If the raise enters that stream unprotected, it will be treated as extra room. Extra room in money behaves like extra room in a closet. Things expand into it, not because you are foolish, but because systems fill available space. The protected gap decision has to happen early, before the first new normal month, before every category gets used to more air. Before the mortgage broker, the dealership, the apps, the subscriptions, the social calendar, and your own tired evenings all discover that there is money available, you choose a portion of the raise that is not allowed to become lifestyle. Not all of it. All is brittle. All turns into resentment. But a real portion, large enough to matter, automatic enough that it does not need a fresh act of character every payday. The money moves before it becomes emotionally spendable. It goes somewhere with a job. Debt reduction if high-interest debt is dragging on you. a cash buffer if one surprise would still break the month, broad low-cost ownership if the foundation is already stable, or a specific freedom fund tied to something that genuinely lowers pressure. When the gap is protected, the raise finally has a chance to do something other than raise the floor. It can build ownership, it can compound, it can remove expensive debt. It can create a buffer that changes how emergencies feel. It can fund a transition, it can buy time. Those outcomes are less glamorous than the upgraded baseline in the first month, but they age better. The nice default fades into ordinary. The protected gap gets stronger if you keep feeding it. The repeatable path is usually plain. Spend less than the new income level permits. Protect the difference before lifestyle absorbs it. Clear the claims that charge the highest interest. Own broad, low-cost pieces of productive assets for a long time. Increase earning power without immediately converting the increase into overhead. None of that is thrilling. It does not give you a dramatic story this weekend. It gives you a different relationship to your future, which is harder to market and more useful to live with. The culture sells the upgrade as proof that work paid off. The quieter truth is that the protected gap is often the proof, not because deprivation is noble, because freedom needs funding before comfort spends the invoice. Now, to keep this honest, we need to define relief carefully. If we define relief as never spending more, we get a cold and useless answer. If we define relief as buying every easier version of life the moment income permits it, we get the comfort ratchet. The useful definition is narrower. Real relief is spending that lowers pressure in a way that lasts. That could mean fixing the car that has been making every commute feel like a gamble. It could mean paying for dental work before the problem becomes larger. It could mean moving closer to work, because 2 hours a day in traffic is slowly eating your health. It could mean hiring help for a bottleneck that has turned your home into a second shift. It could mean buying the reliable appliance, the safer childcare, the quieter apartment, the trip that repairs something in a relationship, rather than performing a version of success for strangers. Those are not leaks just because money leaves. Money is supposed to leave sometimes. A life where money never leaves is not a plan. It is a museum exhibit. The test is what returns and whether it stays. Some spending returns durable relief. Some spending returns novelty. Novelty is not evil. Novelty can be fun. But novelty should be priced as novelty, not disguised as a new requirement. The danger begins when novelty gets promoted to baseline, and baseline starts billing you every month. So the audit is simple, but not easy. Before an upgrade becomes normal, ask what pressure it removes. Name the pressure in plain language, not the fantasy version, not the sales version, the actual pressure. If the answer is clear and durable, the upgrade may be worth it. If the answer is mainly that life will feel nicer for a while, be honest enough to call it what it is. You may still choose it, but do not let a temporary feeling pretend to be permanent relief. Then ask what monthly claim follows it, not just the payment, the claim. What future decisions become narrower because this now has to be paid first? What hours of work are already spoken for? What future raise will arrive already assigned to this? What will be harder to change if your life changes before the contract does? The practical goal is not a frozen lifestyle. The goal is a slower ratchet. Let some upgrades happen only after the protected gap has already been claimed. Let repeated pleasures stay conscious instead of automatic. Let a raise spend a little, protect a lot, and prove itself over time before you turn it into a new minimum. Let big recurring claims pass through a waiting period, not because you are denying yourself, but because the first week of wanting something is the least reliable witness. Desire speaks loudly when it is new. Bills speak quietly for years. For the large categories, price the full tale. If the house is bigger, price taxes, insurance, utilities, repairs, furnishing, commute, and the invested future you are giving up. If the car is nicer, price insurance, maintenance, depreciation, loan length, and the lost ability to go payment-free. If the professional upgrade requires a new lifestyle around it, price the wardrobe, meals, travel, recovery, and time. The sticker is never the whole cost. The tail is where the ratchet hides. And for the raise itself, make the first month boring on purpose. That may be the most important move in the whole file. When the raise arrives, do not rush to prove it arrived. Do not immediately let every delayed desire submit its invoice. Run the first larger paycheck through a quiet routing decision. A portion to life, because relief should be felt. A portion to pressure removal, because pain ignored becomes expensive. A portion to future ownership or flexibility, because if none of the raise leaves today's reach, tomorrow receives nothing. Then live with the old baseline a little longer than your income requires. Not forever. Long enough to see what was actually pressure and what was only impatience. Long enough for the protected gap to become real. Long enough for your nervous system to learn that making more does not automatically mean costing more. That is how the ratchet loses power. Not through a grand renunciation. Through a delay. Through a routing decision. Through the refusal to let every win immediately define a new minimum. There is a particular sadness in earning more and feeling no lighter. People often interpret it as personal failure. They think they are bad at money, or uniquely undisciplined, or somehow cursed to never feel ahead. But many times the story is more mechanical than moral. The raise worked. Then the baseline moved. The person did not fail to receive relief. The relief was converted. Once you see that, you can stop asking only, how do I earn more? Earning more matters. Of course it does. Low income is real. High costs are real. Structural pressure is real. This is not a lecture pretending every problem is a mindset. But if income rises and the baseline rises just as fast, the lived result can still be pressure. More income is fuel. The question is whether the fuel moves you forward or simply powers a heavier machine. So return to the account near the end of the month. The number looks familiar. The confusion is familiar, but now the evidence reads differently. You know to look not for one villain, but for a series of clicks. A convenience that became standard. A tier that became assumed. A payment that became part of the furniture. A home search that turned a raise into a mortgage argument. A future dollar that was promised away before it had a chance to become freedom. And return to that first email. The new salary line. The loosening in your chest. That feeling was not fake. The raise really did contain relief. It just needed protection before the comfort ratchet could reach it. The next time the number goes up, give the raise a job before the month gives it a lifestyle. Let some of it make today easier. Let some of it remove a real pressure. But protect enough that tomorrow is not forced to pay for every comfort today's optimism approved. Do not ask only what nicer life you can now afford. Ask what lighter life you can now preserve. That is the difference. A nicer life can still be heavy. A lighter life gives you room to breathe. The comfort ratchet will always offer the same trade. Turn this win into a higher normal, and you can feel upgraded for a while. The counteroffer is quieter and much more powerful. Keep part of the win outside the new normal, and relief can last longer than the novelty. That is how a raise becomes something you can still feel 6 months later. Not because every dollar stayed untouched. Not because comfort was banned. Because the raise did not get handed whole to a mechanism that only knows how to click upward. The money arrived. The relief can stay. But only if you stop letting every improvement in income become a permanent increase in what it costs to be you.